Johnstead, how the heck are you? Well, it looks like Gettysburg rides again. That place just likes to get its name in the newspaper, I swear. It looks like they were talking to the uh, legislators at a hearing on the election, and they presented some of the evidence to the Pennsylvania legislature. Looks like it could be a problem for Pennsylvania. So, Joe, if you're counting on those votes, you might want to just slow down spending some of that money, son, because you may end up having to give it back. The evidence that they presented, the legislature was basically looking at how do we undo this mess. It's a mess. And a couple of options available to them. I'll give you that right up on it. One option is the counties that refuse to allow poll watchers into the facilities are at a point to where they couldn't actually verify the counts. It only happened up in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and a couple counties right there in the midst of it. The rest of the states allowed poll watchers. Yeah, because it's, after all, law. But they opted not to, and really made a mess of it. Option number one is that those votes may have to be discarded because they were illegitimate votes. They were not processed correctly. Now, that falls on the Democrat governor and his Secretary of State, and of course, the people that they hired to put in place to run that election. So that's on them. Okay? And the legislatures were concerned with disenfranchising people to where they lost their vote. Well, option number two is worse. Okay? There you have a couple of areas that broke the Pennsylvania law, basically. Those poll watchers were allowed to be able to see and actually oversee the counting of those ballots. The other thing that came out in it that was really kind of fascinating is how do you count more mail-in ballots than you mailed out? Yeah, by a lot. About 270,000 of them, as a matter of fact. And that comes off of the Secretary of State's website, which they were laughing about, suddenly took it down. I guess they were watching the hearing. Yeah, because the legislatures, that didn't get lost on the legislatures. If they did away with those votes, Joe Biden lost Pennsylvania by a landslide. Their second option is, by the U.S. Constitution and by the Pennsylvania Constitution, ultimately, if the legislative body decides to do this, they can just tell the electors, the electoral college, you will vote this way. There's been too many discrepancies in the election, and that apparent corruption has taken place. And they can tell the electors, you'll vote this way. Well, that disenfranchises the whole state. So you could tell by the way they were talking, they're probably going to lean more to these states, these counties and cities that did not allow poll watchers in. They're going to take it on the chin. And maybe that'll teach the people in those towns and counties not to let the Democrats run amok in their area. And then they're going to start working on changing the election law. Oddly, a story came out of one of the legislators that's kind of fascinating. It was in 2012, I think he said it was. They had, when they were talking about mail-in ballots, funny they were talking about mail-in ballots way back then before COVID. Oh, man. He wanted a barcode attached to the bottom of each one of these ballots. That was attached to what registered voter it was mailed to, so that as those came back in, they could be tracked. The governor threatened to veto it, and because the legislature was split up in Pennsylvania at that point in time, they didn't think they could override the governor's veto, and they let the bill drop. The guy that introduced the legislation says he thinks it's going back in now, because something needs to be done to where this can't happen again. I think you're going to see some of these states as they get busted on this. And yes, in fact, DOJ has launched criminal investigations. If Trump stays in office, there's probably going to be some heck to pay. They're looking to prosecute because that is a federal crime, tampering with an election. So the investigations have begun to be opened, and they're going to pursue them. If, like I said, if Biden, for some reason, ends up president, you bet all that's going to end. But if Trump stays in office, and this election process is going to have some criminal indictments thrown out, and probably a few people head to prison. Some of the stories they were talking about with the poll watchers, where they were physically threatened. I mean, by these election officials, cussed out, all sorts of things. One lady, it got so bad she had to call the police. So yeah, it's sad. It's sad. Pennsylvania law requires poll watchers be allowed to do their jobs, and by not allowing them to do their jobs in these precincts, they violated the law, and they don't really have much of a chance now of correcting it because we're too far down the road. They're just going to have to throw those ballots out. I would guess they would probably decide to, take away the vote of the few to protect the vote of the many. I think that's a right call, truly. The other thing is just them to pick the electoral college and tell them to go vote this way, and everybody lost their vote. So just and they had about 3 or 4 different charges brought against these areas, and any one of them involved enough votes to turn that state over to Trump. So yeah, it looks very promising, very, very promising. And from what I understand, they've got meetings now with I think Nevada and with Arizona, and I think possibly Michigan. I don't know whether Michigan's legislature's gotten involved or not. If it goes to the Supreme Court, just what little bit they threw out there, and that's what Giuliani was saying, was, these are people that agreed to testify before you. But for these people that came here, and there was probably 8 of them or so, that all had different stories. He said he's got an additional 40 from this area. Pretty convincing stuff. All different issues going on. And apparently a lower court judge in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, had dismissed the case as not having any warrant. Okay, on the first motion from the state's attorney to dismiss, without ever, saying there was no evidence, and they had piles of it. So that passed that along to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which they have now. The legislature says we're going to deal with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because they have done this twice now, where they've altered laws with their rulings, and we're going to have to bring those back and put them in place and maybe pass a law that limits what freedom the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has. So a lot going on with that one. It was amazing of how quickly it turned. It does look like they've got quite a bit of evidence, a lot of experts, and they didn't even get into the Dominion stuff and all that. But yeah, pretty cool. Hopefully Pennsylvania does something from the way those legislators were talking there, getting their phones don't stop ringing and their email boxes stay full. People of Pennsylvania are pretty pissed. So, and it's important to them. It's their jobs. It's their livelihoods. Joe Biden's already guaranteed them that he wants the new Green Deal and all that kind of nonsense. So these people realize they're fighting for their livelihoods. Sad that we're coming to that. Did give me a little bit more hope that when this whole mess gets to the Supreme Court, I think we're probably going to see this election overturned. Because all these states, Giuliani said it best. He said, if this wasn't coordinated, how did all these different states with different people, all of them doing the exact same thing, make it look like a coordinated effort? And that's what the DOJ is looking into. Who coordinated this? So it may get fascinating. But yeah, I thought I'd drop this off up there this morning and see what y'all thought of it. It looks like they're pushing it through, and yeah, they're going to eventually end up in the Supreme Court, where now the majority of the justices on that Supreme Court are people who believe in the letter of the law. as far as the Constitution goes. You know, this blatant fraud. Okay, I know YouTube will tag this as, oh, no, there's no. And I guess my whole thing is if Pennsylvania legislature is now looking like, from what they were talking, they're going to immediately decertify their votes. Okay, that puts Pennsylvania back in a hold column. That's 36 electoral votes. Okay, as these states go back into hold columns, I don't care what AB says. YouTube, he's not the presidential winner. Okay, and until the Supreme Court gets finished with this, you might want to take that stupid tag down. It's going to make you look silly if it all blows up in your face. And more people are beginning to learn something through all this. And following it, they're getting away from CNN and MSNBC and Twitter and so forth. And they're starting to look at, why are these crazy Republicans still acting up? So they're going to see what the Republicans are looking at. And they're starting to find out. Wait a minute, this clown's kid was collecting money from the Red Chinese? They didn't know. Because you guys wouldn't say. He wants to do what? He didn't know because Joe wasn't saying. A lot of moderate Democrats are going, man. They're saying right now about 9% of the people that voted for him would not have voted for him. Which that alone would have made him lose. So, between some very corrupt politicians and very corrupt news media and media, yeah. So YouTube, you might want to just consider taking down your little silly tag and moving on. And let the courts decide. It ain't over till the fat lady sings. Until that Supreme Court drops the gavel on this whole mess, you don't know who the president-elect is or who the president is. You don't know. And as these states begin to fall out because of corruption in their states, as the legislatures are beginning to hear the evidence, you're going to see more drop. Pretty good people in Arizona, pretty good people in Nevada. And if they start rattling the cages of their government, like poor Pennsylvania's been getting rattled, in Michigan and Wisconsin, you people need to stand up and raise Cain. Your votes were stolen. It happened in the big cities, but it takes away your vote too. Don't let them do it to you. Okay? Don't let them steal the republic. Stand up and start letting them know you're not real happy about it. Love you guys. Appreciate you. Gave me a little faith in what they've got going on. They had quite a bit of evidence there. So, hopefully, this country starts waking up a little bit. No AOC, we're not going to be socialists. Y'all have a great day. Talk to you real soon.